Welcome to Thrive Radio. I'm your host, Amy Montgomery, entrepreneur and founder of A Call to Thrive, a strategic brand and growth studio. Today, my guest is Jonathan Reynolds. He's the founder and CEO of Mindful Life, Mindful Work, Inc. Jonathan helps leaders and organizations build stronger teams and better businesses through the power of self-awareness, mindful leadership. His work has grown into a global community focused on creating meaningful change in both life and work. Today, we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, leadership, mindfulness, and why personal growth is often the key to business growth. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
So great to be here. Thank you for having me, Amy.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's first talk about when you started. What first inspired you to build Mindful Life, Mindful Work, Inc.?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Mindful Life, Mindful Work really grew organically out of my own personal practice. When I had graduated from college in the late 90s, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't really want the options that were presented in front of me. So I went on a bit of a personal growth search and then found mindfulness, found practices like meditation and yoga, and found the benefit of self-inquiry and self-development and wanted to share that with others. So over the years, that became more and more codified and really emerged organically through stages like being a consortium and then being a C corporation in the United States and evolving from B2B and including B2C services, and now really starting to include and expand into more of a social change initiative in some ways and supporting other mindful business owners.
I love that. So was there a season in your life when mindfulness became more than just a practice and it turned into a necessity?
You know, I was either fortunate or unfortunate. Right from the beginning, I found personal development practices because of my own suffering, because of my own challenges. I was looking for a smoother and easier way to have this human experience. And so I was trying to address everything in my life like many people do. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was one thing that helped ease each of those things? So I didn't have to have 20 or 40 projects. I could have one project that would help all those things. And when I found self-awareness development and mindfulness practices, it felt like that, because awareness pours into whatever vessel, whatever area of our life needs it, and makes it, I think, more smooth.
Yeah, I like that. So did you envision when you started building an entire ecosystem around mindfulness, or did that just, evolve over time? Because, with your journey, maybe take us through the progress that your business has gone through, because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, it's, I'd love to say that I had the initial vision in the beginning, but it's sort of, I like metaphors. So it's sort of like walking through the woods at night with a candle. You don't see the whole path. You see the next 2 or 3 steps, and then you take one step forward and the candle moves with you and you see the next 2 or 3. And so it really was iterative in a lean startup way. We created something, and in those early days, we had no idea what we were doing. We just knew we wanted to do something to help make the world a better place. And so I started to gather people around me. And in some ways, we were a collection of small business owners in the beginning, but I was really focused on getting B2B work. And so even though we were being mutually self-supportive and handing off projects to each other, if they weren't projects that the greater entity wanted, but it really did evolve. And, again, the greater effort was always to help make the world a better place and help other people have a smoother ride through their human experience. And so, again, whatever form that takes, whatever is useful. I think one of the great things about being mindful or mindfulness is it makes us more responsive to what's right in front of us and to address that need rather than some need we maybe imagine to be there that we want to solve. Well, if it's not a real need and we're trying to solve something with our business that isn't a problem, well, that might be part of the reason our business doesn't take off, is we're not actually relational and responsive in a mindful way to what is needed.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that story of kind of growth too, because I can relate as well. Like you start at one spot and you learn and you grow and you discover new problems and you discover new ways to fix those problems, and things evolve, and it's such an evolution to go through. It's entrepreneurship, let's face it, is such a self-help program.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's such a self-help program of, how much can you grow as an individual, so connected to your success. Now, before when we first met, we talked a little bit about, or you were sharing with me about the intersection of self awareness and team performance. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and your experience. Do businesses eventually become a reflection of the founder's level of self awareness? I don't think that I've ever asked somebody that question, so I'm interested in what you have to say.
Either a director role or managerial role or a leader of people role, those values do create the context and the culture of the company. And so I think that's really important and it infuses with everything. It tucks into everything. It can be how a company designs its protocols or its mission statements, and then how it actually executes, how it builds partnerships with other companies, or how it relates to potential clients. All of that is super important for the company's direction in the long run. And I think that the capacity of the founder and the capacity to look at where their growth edge and where their blind spots are, and to be, again, more relational. I think one of the things that being mindful or practicing mindfulness does is it helps us be more relational, so we're sort of less sort of egocentric or less self-centric, and to actually, again, become responsive to the environment, to the market, to our team, to the other leaders that we've hired. I mean, ideally, we hire really good people and we trust them to be really good, and we don't micromanage. So those are all mindfulness practices, and all of those send a message. So yes, the individual's mindfulness and every individual on the team, and not necessarily even the word mindfulness, but their ability to be self-aware makes a really big difference for the entire ecosystem. And then those individual awarenesses create the cultural awareness. So there's a little bit of a top down, but there's also a little bit of a bottom up. And those two meet to make whatever the company, like, how do people feel when they're at work? Do they enjoy how they feel at work? If they don't enjoy how they feel at work, what are they going to do to change that? What practices are in place to support humans doing their roles? Because even if their role is just to move a widget from one place to another, they're still a human, and they still have to do that well, and they still have to do that efficiently, and they still have to like it enough to show up tomorrow. And so all of that comes from the culture that's created.
I love that. So, how do you personally stay grounded while you're leading such a broad mission like this?
I think it's one of the benefits of practicing. And again, I distinguish between the word mindfulness and mindful. Mindfulness for me is more of a specific practice, and being mindful is a little more vague. And so I think that, when we refine our own attention, we show up and we're ready. So for instance, right before I got on this call, I was folding laundry, like literally till like 2 minutes before I got on this call. It's not like I sat down and sort of got my thoughts together and it took 25 minutes to do that. I was in a little bit of a rush. And so, but when you're present, you show up and you attend to what needs tending. So I think that's a really important thing to emphasize, is it makes you much more agile. It makes you much more responsive. It allows you to let go of things that stick to others easily. It lets you let go of those more easily. I'm not worried about the laundry. I'm not even thinking about the laundry. It makes for a really good example in this moment, but I'm not there anymore. And the same is true as if I have an argument or if something goes really well. I think one of the things that the people that I've related to as either colleagues or partners or clients, I think the great benefit of our work together, and many have named this explicitly, is that they feel that presence. They feel really seen. They feel attended to. They feel as if they're the only person in the world in that moment, because they are the only person in my experience in that moment. Others aren't in my experience. I'm not thinking about anything else. And I think that translates into a real powerfulness. I mean, there's buzzwords like executive presence and stuff like that, and I think it's related to that. But can you be in the moment for real? And that's a different sort of thing, and I think that's felt.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get stuck in their heads. I always hear that phrase from Tony Robbins: if you get in your head, you're dead.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's so alluring because the mind is the most creative thing in the universe. But it also lives in a world of abstraction. Ideas are abstractions. Ideas can translate into something tangible and real, but the idea itself is just an abstraction. And so one of the beautiful things about being mindful is it's also being bodyful. In fact, mind in most traditions doesn't actually mean brain and thinking. It means body mind. It means the holistic, the whole entity. And so one of the things about being in contact with your body and being embodied is the body's always in the present moment. It can't be in the future or the past. The mind can be anywhere. The body can't. The body has to be in the present moment. And so when you make contact with awareness with your body, other people feel that because you're really there with them.
I love that analogy. So, for someone who hears the word mindfulness and they immediately think meditation, how would you describe I would say the work that you do, because you're working with executives, and we talked a little bit about it, about being present, but you're not necessarily out there teaching executives to meditate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what does that look like? What description would you give?
Well, most of the early CEOs and executives I've worked with, if I would have said the word meditation or mindfulness, they would have hung up the phone. They had no interest in that at all. And so,
Yeah.
but I still wanted to convey and be useful and give the good stuff. And so the classical, in the ancient languages where the word mindfulness first appeared, mindfulness means things remembered. So it's the capacity to remember our presence, our capacity to be here. And so the way that shows up in the work is it often means just making a leader more relational, because leaders have been taught in our culture that they have to have all the answers. That's what a leader is. That's
Mhm.
not what a leader is. A leader is someone like a conductor of a band or an orchestra. Other people are playing the instruments and they need to coordinate and they need to see the big picture and strategize in ways that individual contributors don't necessarily need to do all the time. And so a lot of the work is building a confidence and a willingness and a vulnerability for leaders to say, I'm not sure, let's ask so and so. Or, oh, I should check in with those 3 that are experts in this area. Why would I know more than the experts in this area? Why should I feel like I need to know? And so a lot of the work is in navigating through what's actually useful. Is it useful to be a know-it-all? Or is it useful to actually be relational and to draw the best out of your team members? Because the best team members leave if you don't draw the best out of them. They know they're
Yeah.
better than the value you're accessing. So they're like, I'm out of here. This is not for me. And so it does so many things at so many layers when we're more relational. So a lot of the work coaching senior leaders has fallen into that space.
I love that. And that helps with employee engagement, and keeping people from exiting and you don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre when people are shocked and that person is really high value and either hasn't gotten credit publicly, hasn't been celebrated, hasn't been really asked their opinion. And then it's like people like to be included. And if they don't feel included, they're going to go where they do feel included. It's a little bizarre that that's not recognized more regularly.
Yeah, definitely. So you've worked with a lot of different leaders with different backgrounds. What patterns do you see in leaders that thrive versus those that burn out?
Well, I think that's a great question. And so I think those that thrive generally value themselves beyond their role. They're not defined by their role. They have some personal inner compass that guides them. They're connected to their own purpose and meaning and value, and they move in that way. The job just happens to be a place to practice that and display that. But the job doesn't create that for them. They showed up with that or did some personal growth work. That doesn't mean you can't do personal growth work once you're in the role, but they've done a lot of that. And so again, the job is the expression, not the completion or the confirmation of their value. The job adds ultimately no value to them other than now it's sort of made explicit and there's a title and there's money and there's stuff, but they have that without the role.
Do you believe that success without self-awareness eventually catches up?
Depends on how you define success. If a success is making money, then yes, definitely. If somebody defines success as being true to themselves and wants to be able to sleep really good at night, regardless of whether the money is there, well, then their definition of success already aligns with this nurturing, supportive, and self-sustaining thing. So yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that has happened in the world is people sort of look at the number and the money. And of course, we all need money to live. It's nice to have lots of money, so we have more spending power and freedom in that conventional sense. And if that's the definition and we're just going for that, eventually burnout. I mean, I think that's one of the things we're seeing post-COVID is a lot of people were like, why would I keep basically selling moments of my life, even though the pay is good, for something I'm not actually connected to and don't believe in, doesn't have meaning or purpose for me? Like, life is short. 80 years is not a long time. And so, we each have to decide how we want to sell moments of our life for income. And we all have to do it in some portion, but people will have to decide how much or how little they're willing to do and what the value of that time is and how much they need to be paid. So that's all a decision we need to make for our own personal situation. People are in different situations, and then move forward.
Like that. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they spend years building their businesses, and you've been around a lot of them, but the majority, they spend very little time trying to understand themselves. Do you think self-awareness influences how people show up in their personal brand?
Yeah, I think that choosing something that you're deeply connected to, that can be a through line to your business. And so, for instance, Mindful Life, Mindful Work, I had a very intimate and personal relationship with mindful self-awareness. And that was the thing that mattered most to me. And so, the forms have changed slightly. I caution against changing the business. I see some people in the mindful space, they change their business name every 3 to 5 years, thinking that the reason it's not working is because something needs to be changed. And that may be true, but it just looks like they're indecisive externally, even if they're getting more clear. So I would say do your job on the front end to really pick something that you can grow with. And then there's iteration within that. Again, I've iterated lots within that framework, but the brand continues. And that's all self-awareness, and that's all checking in. Most of my most creative projects, I don't think about how to be crafty or creative and to trick the market in some way so I make a bunch of money. No, it's when I'm all alone and I allow space to feel, what do I feel? What does the world need? What do I need? What do I want to create? What am I really good at that is needed and that the moment is right? That comes out of self-awareness. It doesn't come out of externally looking. It comes from internally looking.
I absolutely love that. And I have to pipe in here because of the journey that I just went through. Somebody's got to learn from me. They have to learn from me the hard way. So, I had all of this experience, knew how to scale businesses, Doblin trained. Some people might not know what that is, but at Deloitte, they basically created an algorithm that they studied all of the companies that turned themselves into Fortune 50, and they found that not only if they plugged themselves into the algorithm, the people that were doing these certain things and growing in certain areas in their business, they outperformed the S&P 500, but it was almost just, plug and play. Like, you do this, you're going to succeed, right? And so, they do large engagements, 1.5 million for this. There's coaches out there that are selling $250,000. So I was trained in that, and then, started to go into all the marketing stuff and was a CMO. And in the background, kind of using some of those skills I had learned to solve all these business problems, which is how I became a CMO. When I started my marketing agency, in a weird way, it wasn't necessarily aligned with, to your point, who I was, what I was passionate about, my personality, who I am. I didn't initially put brand myself, right? I just thought, okay, I'm over here. I treated it almost like a job. Like, this is what I'm doing. And then this is me over here. And part of that was I was sick. And so I was in fight or flight. And, I couldn't be self-aware at that point. Like, I was just, I was not doing good. But as I healed myself, came out of that, started to dive deep. It started to be more aware and in touch with who I was, and all of that. I went through this realization of, oh my gosh, like, I'm offering up this tiny piece of myself to help people, right? And to your point about your mindfulness being a passion, for me, it's, wanting people to be seen, wanting people to succeed, right? And do the impossible, because my life is full of doing the impossible, and I want that for other people. So yeah, I redid my business based off of who I am and all of me, and rebranded it as a personal brand. Changed my life, changed how everyone perceived me, because now I'm showing up 100%. And I feel like a lot of businesses do that because we're taught in the marketing realm to market to your ideal buyers. Well, that's true to a certain point, but if they are buying your expertise, it's not true. If you're the one that's got to show up to actually deliver the value, you have to do the personal brand on your website. But I just wanted to mention, because it so resonated what you just said to me and the journey. And then I created a program to help people to walk through that and to dive deep and force them to really dive deep and become self-aware of who they are and how they want to show up. So one thing we've both noticed is success often comes from recognizing patterns others miss. I like that. We have that in common. How important is awareness in making better business decisions?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's really important. Again, things are moving fast. It's a volatile world. Change is happening all the time. And not just one thing. It's not like, oh, this one trend is changing. All the trends are changing all the time. And so, there's some logic to hitting the sweet spot, and then there's some art to it. There's some feel to it, and there's sort of knowing what the general feel around a certain industry is. Like, just for instance, using mindfulness, watching mindfulness unfold over the last 20 years. There were times that it was peaking, and then there were times that people were sort of cynical about it because it was saturated and it was a buzzword. And then, things go through an evolution. Well, some of that can be measured, and some of that is just feel and sort of observing how people are talking about something. And so, one of the things of being mindful, or practicing being mindful and developing that over time, is we become more attuned to the subtle. We get attuned to things that are not said. We get attuned to tone. We get attuned to systems. We get attuned to things that are overlooked by those that are just looking with their eyes. And so I think that's really important, that capacity, as it expands, then translates into all business decisions. You look at anyone who's been largely successful economically, like Warren Buffett or somebody like that. Yeah, they're doing the numbers that everybody knows are important. And there's an intuitive piece. There's all that experience. You can say, well, that's all his experience, sort of thing. And yes, that's part of it. But why is that experience so valuable to him? Because it shows up as the sum total in any given decision. And I think the more we're familiar with our own experiences and how we relate to our learnings, then that actually becomes wisdom at a certain time. It goes beyond knowledge. It just goes beyond knowing stuff to we know how to know. We know a way of knowing that is useful.
Yeah, I like that. I want to talk a little bit about the community that you've built. Now, you started the community early on, but you've continued to grow. You have a social media platform. Why do you think belonging is becoming such an important part of business today?
Well, I think belonging just socially is an important thing in general. I think that feeling isolated is sort of the root of lots of problems in the world, and especially in Western cultures. Collectivistic cultures like Asia have a little less of an isolation problem just generally. Of course, that's not true across the board. But then within companies, the word belonging really came through DEI initiatives, and I think rightfully so. If people aren't included, they're not going to participate and they're not going to feel valued. And so again, it's like you hire people that are intelligent and smart and good at what they do, but then if you neglect them, they're not going to perform. Most of the numbers, and I don't have the numbers in front of me and I don't know exactly what they are, but they usually say something like people are performing at like 40% of their capacity. And that often is because they don't feel like they belong. And so they just go up and do the bare minimum. That movie Office Space was funny because that's where a lot of people find themselves. I'm an intelligent person who has, a couple $100,000 in education sometimes, and you're asking me to do this stuff that literally a golden retriever could do. And so that doesn't feel good. And so like belonging is so essential, because it's not just feeling the sense of belonging as far as they like me or something like that. That's important. But also, like, is the sum total of who I am, do I feel like I belong? Can I be my full self here? And if there's any issue where, somebody's sexual orientation or gender or anything like that, they feel rejected, well, then they're not going to include the best of themselves professionally either, because people want to just show up and be themselves. Like,
Yeah.
let's create companies where people can just show up and be themselves, and not in some wild or outlandish way. And there's got to be some guardrails, but people should be able to go be their core self, and it should feel non-threatening to others.
Yeah.
And so, again, I've used some examples, but that also, again, translates to how they're going to perform. I mean, if you tie my hands behind my back and say, okay, perform without your arms, I'm going to do a very limited job. And so if people feel like that, metaphorically, they're going to do a very limited job.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening today and they feel overwhelmed and maybe burnout or disconnected from the reason why they started their business in the first place, or, maybe, even why they're in the position that they are in their organization, what's one piece of wisdom you'd want to leave with them?
You don't need to do it all today. You only need to do one thing today. If you're so burnt out that you feel like can do zero today, well, just think about it. At the end of a year, if you do zero every day, you'll have done zero. If you do one tiny thing, if you send one email, if you think about one possibility and do 5 minutes of thinking about the business, at the end of the year, you'll have done 365 things. And so Mindful Life, Mindful Work grew out of that way of thinking. I did not force myself at any stage to do anything that I did not want to do. Did I do some things I didn't want to do over 20 years? Of course, but only when those things actually arose in a way that they needed to be done and I wanted to do them enough to do them. Don't push, step forward one step at a time, and anything is possible. So Mindful Life, Mindful Work still to this day is like water. It just flows, a little bit of flowing every day. Not trying to build a skyscraper every day, like just a little bit of flowing every day. And over time, water wears away stone, not because water stops and does something special to the rock. It's just flowing past it. It's just over time it does. And so Mindful Life, Mindful Work grew organically in that way. It's part of what I love about it. It can't be recreated because somebody has to actually put in the time in a gentle way to grow. It's the sort of company that is not like other companies in that regard. And so if you want to grow something unique, grow it slowly. If you need money today, go get a job at McDonald's and don't put it on your resume. Like, just go get a job and get the money coming in that you need, and don't tell anyone if you don't want that to be a part of your career story. Yeah, so one step today, just one.
Yeah, I love that. So I have one last question for you. What is your truth that has gotten you this far in your journey?
I really love self-awareness and mindfulness, of course, but even slightly more core than that for me is simplicity. I really value beingness over doing. I value free time over money. I value freedom over stability. And for me, freedom over security. And for me, all of that has the foundation of simplicity. In this moment, if I do nothing, I can still enjoy this moment. And for me, that the core of that is simplicity. So that's been the through line, even just slightly before mindful self-awareness.
Love that. So Jonathan, if there are individuals that are listening that would love to work with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, you can visit the Root website, which is mindfullifemindfulwork.com. You'll also, I think you're going to post in the show notes the invitation, the Mindful Business Owners Group. We're offering 50% off for the first 6 months. It's basically a supportive coaching think tank for small business owners that want to have conversations around what's challenging them and get the supportive community.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Amy. It's just been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're listening, you want more information about this podcast and upcoming shows, you can visit acalltothrive.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.